The chill of the New York autumn was a familiar, crisp scent I'd come to associate with success. My apartment, a sanctuary of minimalist chic, was a testament to years of calculated ambition. The polished wood floors reflected the soft light from the city skyline, a perfect backdrop for the life I'd meticulously curated. That's when she showed up. A knock, timid and out of place in this building. I opened the door, and there she was, my mother, Maria. Her face was etched with a lifetime of hard work I had fought to avoid. She wore a worn, oversized coat, the kind you buy at a discount store, and held a small, beat-up suitcase. Her eyes, filled with a hope I found suffocating, met mine. "I came to see you, Sarah," she said, her voice a ghost of the past I'd buried. A pang of something unpleasant, not guilt, but annoyance, tightened my chest. This wasn't the life she belonged in. This was my life. I saw a disruption, a reminder of everything I had overcome and left behind. I looked at her, at the suitcase, and felt a cold certainty settle over me. "You don't belong here," I told her, my voice as flat as the concrete outside. I stepped back, my hand on the doorknob, and without another word, I pulled the door shut, locking the past away. The silence that followed was a quiet victory. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. The next morning, the city was a wash of gray, matching the emptiness in my gut. I tried to dismiss the memory of my mother's face as I sipped my coffee, scrolling through a meticulously crafted social media feed. The world I'd built was built on appearances, on showing a life of effortless success and sophistication. My mother represented the opposite, a life of struggle, sacrifice, and small failures I had no patience for. Growing up, I'd watched her work tirelessly at menial jobs, her hands calloused and her spirit worn. I saw her exhaustion not as a virtue, but as a cautionary tale. I knew from a young age that I wouldn't be her. I'd leave our small town, our cramped apartment, and the suffocating feeling of being stuck. I had escaped it all, and her presence at my door was a haunting attempt to pull me back into that world of limitations. The cold logic of my decision was absolute. I had to protect the life I had built, the person I had become. Letting her in would be an admission of failure, a step back into the shadow of the past. Her struggle was a part of her story, not mine. I had detached myself from it a long time ago. Mark, my husband, came home that evening, his smile a warm contrast to the persistent chill in the apartment. He knew something was off, his sharp mind picking up on the subtle tension I couldn't completely hide. "Rough day?" he asked, putting his keys on the entryway table. "No," I said, a little too quickly. "Just tired." He saw through it. "You're not telling me something." His concern felt like an accusation. I briefly explained the situation, downplaying her visit as a strange, unannounced appearance from a distant relative. "She just showed up, Mark. I had to turn her away. It was a complete shock." The details I omitted, her worn coat, the suitcase, the look in her eyes, were the ones that mattered. Mark's expression shifted from concern to confusion, and then to a kind of quiet disapproval. "Sarah, your own mother, you just locked her out." The disapproval stung. I felt defensive, cornered. "You don't understand," I insisted. "You don't know our history. She's always been a burden. I worked too hard to let her mess up what we have." Mark didn't argue, but the silence that followed was heavier than any argument could have been. It was the first crack in the carefully constructed facade of our perfect life. Days bled into a week, and the silence from Mark became a physical presence in our home. He was polite, but distant, and his quiet judgment was a constant low-level hum of anxiety for me. The weather turned gray and wet, mirroring my mood. I tried to immerse myself in my work, in planning a high-profile art gallery event, but my focus was scattered. I found myself staring blankly at spreadsheets, my mind wandering to a simple, unadorned memory. My mother's hands, flour-dusted from baking bread on a Saturday morning, a rare moment of warmth I had long since dismissed. The guilt I had so coldly rejected now felt like a low fever, a persistent ache. It wasn't a strong feeling, just a tiny voice whispering doubts I had never allowed myself to entertain. The real consequence came with a phone call from my sister Clara, who lived back home. "Sarah," she said, her voice sharp and brittle. "Mom called me, crying. What did you do to her?" My carefully managed world was starting to crumble, piece by piece, as the consequences of my cruelty began to ripple outwards, beyond my control. If you're finding yourself invested in this story, hit that subscribe button to join our community and never miss an update. The phone call with Clara ended in a fiery exchange, her anger a blistering testament to the deep bonds I had severed. She accused me of being heartless, of forgetting where I came from. "She's your mother, Sarah. How could you?" she'd screamed, her voice cracking with pain. I hung up on her, my hands shaking. The guilt intensified, but it was now tangled with resentment. Why was I the one being made to feel bad? I had worked for everything I had. My success was my own doing, and it felt unjust that I should be punished for protecting it. But the punishment was coming. A few days later, a colleague I had always considered a close friend, Jess, canceled our lunch plans with a flimsy excuse. I later saw her on a coffee run with another colleague, both of them shooting me furtive, uneasy glances. Word had gotten out. Clara, in her fury, had likely told people back home, and the news had a way of traveling. My carefully cultivated professional and social image was being tainted by a single, heartless act. The cold isolation I had felt in my perfect apartment was no longer just a feeling. It was becoming a reality. The world I had built to escape my mother's orbit was slowly pushing me out. The chasm between Mark and me was no longer a subtle divide. It was a physical space we navigated carefully every day. He spent his evenings on the phone with his family, his back turned to me, the hushed tones of his conversations a constant, brutal reminder of a warmth and connection I had cast aside. He had stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing his own. We were two strangers sharing a lease, and the art gallery event I had been planning, once a source of immense pride, now felt like a hollow spectacle. I went through the motions, feigning enthusiasm and engagement, but a part of me was always looking over my shoulder, imagining the whispers and sideways glances. The city outside, a place I had once seen as a testament to my success, now felt indifferent, its relentless energy mocking my quiet despair. One evening, Mark finally broke the silence that had become our normal. He came home with his face pale and grim, clutching his phone. "I spoke to Clara," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "Your mother. She's in a shelter. She's been there for a week. She lost her job and has nowhere to go." The news hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp intake of breath. A shelter. The word itself was a stark, ugly stain on the luxurious canvas of my life. A shelter. I could feel the cold tile floor of my apartment, the carefully selected art on the walls, mocking me. The life I had so desperately worked for was a cruel joke, built on the foundation of my mother's desperation. The carefully constructed narrative of my success, built on the rubble of my past, was no longer sustainable. I had escaped poverty, but I had brought something far worse with me, a moral bankruptcy that was now being exposed for the world to see. The air in our apartment, once filled with the quiet hum of our shared ambition, now vibrated with unspoken accusations. Every morning, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated not my achievements, but the growing dust on surfaces I no longer cared to clean. I found myself avoiding eye contact with Mark, fearing the disappointment I knew I'd see. My carefully cultivated image, both to myself and to the world, was shattering, revealing a brittle, lonely woman beneath. The city, once my accomplice in ambition, now felt like a giant, indifferent eye, watching my downfall. The weight of my actions began to crush me. I tried to call Clara, but my number was blocked. My frantic calls to my mother's old phone number were met with the sterile voice of a disconnection message. The walls of my apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. The silence was no longer a victory. It was a punishment, a constant reminder of my isolation. My husband was a stranger. My friends had drifted away, and now my sister had cut me out entirely. The guilt, once a whisper I could ignore, was now a loud, unbearable shout. I had sacrificed my family for a life I now realized was built on a lie. It was a life of appearances, of hollow conversations and superficial connections. The one person who loved me unconditionally, despite all my flaws and cruelty, was now homeless because of me. The realization was a devastating wave that pulled me under, a moment of profound clarity that shattered my carefully constructed reality. My past, the one I had so desperately tried to escape, had caught up to me. The shame of what I had done was a weight I couldn't bear. The fear of being alone, which had always fueled my ambition, was now a tangible reality. I was losing everything, and it was all my fault. Every success, every expensive item, every polite nod of approval from a colleague felt tainted. My meticulously planned future had become an empty echo, a monument to a person who no longer existed, if she ever truly did. The silence of my apartment became a physical entity, pressing down on me, amplifying the sound of my own frantic thoughts. I paced the polished floors, the coldness seeping through my thin slippers, each step a testament to the emptiness I felt. The expensive art on the walls, once a source of pride, now seemed to sneer at me, mocking the moral void they adorned. I was surrounded by beauty and luxury, yet I felt utterly impoverished, stripped bare of the human connections that truly mattered. The ambition that had once been my driving force now felt like a cruel joke, a relentless pursuit of nothing. The city continued its relentless, indifferent pulse, but I was no longer a part of its rhythm. I moved through my days in a fog of regret, the vibrant colors of my world fading to gray. Mark gave me an ultimatum, a final choice that felt both brutal and merciful. "I'm going to see her tomorrow," he said one night, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm going to find your mother and make sure she's okay. And if you're not with me, I don't know what to tell you, Sarah." His words were a mirror, showing me the woman I had become, cold, selfish, and utterly alone. The thought of losing him, of him being the one to do what I should have done, was the final blow, the moment the ice around my heart began to crack. I remembered the scent of my mother's old house, the taste of her simple, home-cooked meals, and the feeling of her hand on my back when I was a child. The memories, once dismissed as pathetic sentimentality, now felt like a desperate lifeline, a faint whisper of who I once was. The life I had built was a gilded cage, and I had been the one to lock myself inside. I couldn't bear the thought of him going alone. "I'll come with you," I whispered, the words feeling foreign and heavy on my tongue. I have to. I had spent years perfecting the art of detachment, but in that moment, I understood that I was not an island. My life was inextricably linked to the people I had pushed away, and the pain I had caused was a wound that only I could try to mend. The weight of his words settled over me, a chilling realization that my carefully constructed independence was nothing more than a fragile illusion. I had always believed that self-sufficiency meant never needing anyone. But now, faced with the prospect of losing Mark, I understood the terrifying emptiness of true solitude. His quiet resolve, his unwavering moral compass, highlighted the stark contrast with my own choices. It was a painful awakening, a recognition that the strength I had prided myself on was, in fact, a profound weakness, a barrier I had erected against the very human connection I now desperately craved. The shelter was a stark, humbling place, a world away from the pristine luxury of my apartment. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and stale coffee. Mark held my hand, his grip tight and reassuring, but I felt a million miles away. We found her in the common area, hunched over a cup of tea, her hair grayer than I remembered, her shoulders slumped. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes, once full of hope, held only a weary emptiness. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. There was no fiery confrontation, no dramatic apology, just an old woman, broken and tired. "Sarah," she said, her voice a hollow whisper. I tried to explain, to apologize, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? "I'm sorry I turned you away." It sounded pathetic, inadequate. She simply nodded, a slow, painful acknowledgement of my presence. The woman in front of me wasn't my mother anymore. She was a stranger, a ghost of the person I had abandoned. My cruelty had not just caused her hardship. It had fundamentally changed her. The consequences of my actions were not just my own pain. They were hers, etched into the weary lines of her face. Her quiet acceptance was more devastating than any outburst could have been. It was the crushing reality of what I had done, a permanent scar on a person who once loved me unconditionally. Her resignation was a mirror of my own failure, a testament to the irreparable damage I had caused. Her silence was a heavy shroud, wrapping around me, suffocating me with the weight of my past. I searched her face for any flicker of the warmth I remembered, any hint of the fierce love she once had for me, but found only a profound weariness. It was as if I had drained her of all emotion, leaving behind only an empty vessel. The realization that I couldn't simply undo the damage, that my cruelty had left an indelible mark, was a bitter pill to swallow. This wasn't a problem I could throw money at or charm my way out of. This was a human cost, a soul-deep wound that I and I alone had inflicted. I sat with her for hours, Mark a silent, supportive presence beside me. We helped her pack the few belongings she had, and we arranged for her to stay at a small, clean apartment nearby, paid for in full. She accepted the help with a quiet resignation that was more painful than any anger or resentment could have been. The woman I had left behind was not the same woman I was trying to save. I had stolen her spirit, and it was a wound I could never heal. Mark's hand still held mine, but I could feel the distance between us, a distance born of the secret cruelties I had held in my heart. He was a good man, and I had exposed my worst self to him. As I stood in the doorway of her new apartment, she looked at me one last time. Her eyes filled with a sad understanding. "You don't have to stay, Sarah," she said, her voice thin and frail. "You have your life." The words were a bitter echo of my own, and I finally understood what they meant. I had locked her out, and in doing so, I had locked myself out of her life forever. The door closed, not on her, but on the daughter she once had. I walked back into the cold night, alone in the silence of my own making, finally understanding the true meaning of regret. The door didn't just close on my mother. It closed on any chance of redemption. The life I had so desperately clung to felt empty and meaningless. In my quest for a perfect future, I had lost the only connection that mattered, and I was left to wander alone in a world of my own making. The chill of the New York night seeped into my bones, a coldness that mirrored the emptiness inside me. My apartment, once a symbol of my triumph, now felt like a gilded cage, its luxury a constant reminder of the emotional poverty I had created for myself. I had achieved everything I thought I wanted, only to find it was all hollow. The silence that had once been my victory was now my tormentor, a constant reminder of the family I had alienated and the love I had squandered. There was no going back, no erasing the past. Only the long, solitary road ahead, paved with the bitter bricks of my own making.